Just check that. Okay, I am lucky enough to be here for the post-lunch shift. Are we all awake? Are we ready for another session, or are we falling asleep? I can hear the giggles. I'm assuming we're falling asleep. But it's really lovely to be here. I'm Huzaifa. I am responsible for growth at Resolute Education. We teach kids how to code, and after all the incredible sessions this morning, I really am humbled to be here. I'm one of those youth that they talked about getting into those rooms of really smart, really experienced people to come give opinions. And so a lot of pressure on me today as one of the kids standing on the stage, sharing some insights, but really excited to be here and talking about some of the work that we do. And I think for me, before we even get started, just talking about my why, I think that's probably the easiest way to start, which is as a young kid going through the systems that we do, coming from just a normal school in Maritzburg, for the Maritzburg people here, and of course spending some time in madrasa as well. We always learn about being good and being a goodness or a light in the world. And so of course I thought that I would want to be this too. So for all of you who were raised in Indian households, when you tell your mom and dad that you want to do good in the world, what do you think they think you want to be? Yep, pretty much. So I too wanted to become a doctor, and a few years later, I am proud to announce that I didn't quite make it. But Allah plans, of course, and my path was different, and really happy to be in the space of tech today, teaching kids how to code, building systems of innovation. And even though I didn't quite become a doctor, I did get a chance to experience the world of medicine. I'm a pharmacologist by background, so I do have a background in regenerative medicine and healthcare, but discovered a passion for education while I was at university. And I thought that was really important because when we talk about introduction to tech, I'm one of those kids that can't code, or can't code very well, but I realized that education was the catalyst for change very quickly. And so what I used to do was at university, when I was in second year, I used to teach first year biology and physics and calculus, and then third year taught second years and first years. But that was really important because when I realized the lights that switch on when you are working with kids who don't quite understand and watching them finally understand, but also figure out their path, that's really where the magic comes alive. And so I'm quite excited to have been able to pivot a little bit into the space. So for me, it was actually COVID that was a catalyst for EdTech. And so when Dr. Shaheen was talking earlier and how EdTech is so pivotal in the world that we live in a world that's evolving and technologically driven, it was actually COVID that catalyzed that for me. So while I was in my honors, after tutoring for a few years, COVID happened, everything came to a standstill, but the one thing that didn't come to a standstill, of course, was innovation. When we're all sitting at home or in our labs, we didn't really have the ability to just go and be with people, so we built systems that allowed us to continue teaching our kids from wherever we were. So started with that a few years ago, and for us what we realized was that very quickly the kids were able to adapt, to be able to innovate, to be able to use tools that they had never ordinarily used before. What was also really cool is we had teachers that were 50, 60, 70 years old learning how to use Zoom, learning how to build lessons online, and it was really, really cool. So for me, that was where my introduction to tech and EdTech happened. And then, of course, in 2022, a friend of mine who had started Resolute called me and talked to me about scaling. And at that point, I had been building the business unit for the first EdTech, and I thought it was an interesting challenge to finally get into the world of proper technology as somebody who wasn't technical. So I joined Resolute, and in summary, essentially, at Resolute, we teach kids how to code. It is from 5 years old all the way to 15, 16 years old. The idea is not just teaching them how to code, because when I joined, we had taught literally thousands of kids how code works, how coding works, and what they could do with it. But it wasn't enough, because while we were future-proofing them, we realized that they were just doing it for the sake of doing it. And it's sad because in the world of technology, if you give kids the ability to code without the ability to think, or to forward think or think laterally, you're pretty much creating just technicians and not contributors to an economy. And so for me, it was a different kind of medicine. It was future-proofing and really giving them the skills that they needed to be able to do what we wanted them to do. And when we talked about the concept of Madinah, when Ismail first reached out to me and we were chatting, it brought me back to this, because what I realized was all we did was we gave these kids the tools to be able to not just think, but to be able to solve problems. And so a few years ago, we were in India. There was a school that we went to that was very, very interesting. Of course, India have an incredible education system. But this school specifically taught kids how to connect with the world around them, how to learn how to respect the world that they have and live sustainably. So from the time they come into school up until 12 years old, they're actually not allowed any devices, but they learn how to farm, they learn agriculture, they learn farming and a bunch of cool things in terms of how to take care and respect the earth. And so we were in the school, and we had all of our projects lined up, and we have different projects for different kids. And one of these projects is a smart garden, where we teach kids how to use soil sensors and program them essentially for different plants, so that the sensor detects the water or the lack of water, then activates a pump for them to be able to water the plants by themselves. And another project that we had for these kids was an autonomous line-following car. So essentially something like a Tesla, but the very basic technology behind it of how do you keep a car between the lines to stay in a lane. And so there were a lot of these kids that were quite blown away by the fact that you could get this car not to hit any objects or to stay on a line. But there was this little kid in the corner just fascinated by the two projects that were standing side by side. And so where all the other kids were like, oh, I want it to go faster, or can we make it turn more accurately? This kid was really quiet, but you could see that their mind was working. And so I approached them, of course, and I was like, what's going on? What are you thinking? And he's like, do you think you could combine these systems? And I asked him, what do you mean? And he said, well, my dad doesn't come home early enough because he's a farmer in the farms outside. And they spend long days in the hot sun trying to water these plants. But I was thinking if I could connect the soil sensor from the smart garden to the autonomous car from the line following project, we can maybe create these automated vehicles that could go and water the plants so my father can come home early. But that's actually the magic, because when we're talking about ethical innovation, an innovation that actually is designed for humanity, it's these kinds of stories that we're trying to unlock. It's these kinds of thinking processes where it's not just my dad coming home early, but how can I take all of these farmers off of the farmlands, away from the heat, and teach them how to use these tools so that they can be human first. And another story, of course, was a kid in Lesotho, where we met him just a year ago, actually. And so it was their science festival, one of the schools, and this kid literally came with a bunch of wires and magnets. And I didn't quite understand what was going on. He didn't use our program, but I got to chatting to him a little bit, and he was like, well, there's a dump yard near my house, and I found these magnets and these wires, and I learned about wireless electricity in school. And so I asked him a little bit more, and it turned out he had just gotten a smartphone, which happened to have wireless charging capability, but couldn't afford a wireless charger. And so what happened was he did a little bit of research, just being able to connect to the internet, which is an amazing place if you know how to use it, and he actually developed his own very rudimentary wireless charging system, which actually worked. And for me, that was insane, because what it showed me is that when you're creating innovation that's ethical, it's actually the definition of what the Madinah principles teach us. But more importantly, just showing these kids where, what could be and the problems that they could solve completely changes their perspectives and allows them to become meaningful contributors, not just consumers. So for us, I think this is actually one of the stories I wanted to leave you guys with from the world of tech and ed tech, is that it's not the tool, but how you use the tool and how important it is to be able to future-proof the next generation, because they're going to be the kids that are going to be standing here just a few years from now, crafting policy, being able to make change, and actually driving what the kids behind them are going to learn in schools. So for me, by the way, that's just some of the kids in our programs. When we talk about innovation, what we're actually doing is we're solving a much bigger problem. And it was addressed this morning as well, which is we've got 6 out of 10 young South Africans under the age of 24 just sitting around. They don't have jobs, and unfortunately, they're not becoming contributors to our economy. They're just sitting and hoping and probably attending 5 or 6 different CV workshops in a time where we physically can't hire them, sometimes because of the lack of skills. But for us, what we're realizing is that it's not just it's not the youth that are broken, it's our systems. And we've had a few teachers talk to us this morning, a few architects, of course, and these are the systems that we actually can try and correct, not just by ourselves, but of course leveraging that Madinah blueprint and trying to build sustainable systems that eventually benefit these youth and ultimately allow them to become the employers. It led me to a thought, which is that they're not just our beneficiaries. We're not just doing it for them because we owe it to them, but it's because they are the people that are going to be responsible in just a few years, and they've got the responsibility to be able to make our country and the world a better place. Now, for us, it's actually really important to continuously show them that they have a voice and that they have the ability to make change. And so what I've realized is we can actually spend a little bit more time that we have, not just tech-based education, but teaching them other skills, and more importantly, that they have a voice. So in the last year and a bit, I've been spending some time with the Global Shapers. It's an initiative from the World Economic Forum, which is pretty much just agnostic. The idea is get change-maker mentality driven into as many youth around the world, teach them how to use different systems that we have to be able to make impact sustainably. And so through the Shapers programs, when we talk about building communities through innovation, empowering them through innovation, it's not just innovation in the space of technology, but in the way they think. And when we look at the number of youth that are present in South Africa, what we realize is, even if you look at like the voting stats, which I saw just a few days ago, it's shocking how little of them actually use their voices. So the first thing we do is, of course, teach them that they have a voice and that they can drive change, and teaching them how to participate in an ethical way is pretty critical for us to be able to change systems. The second, of course, are the skills, and we talked about it, but essentially trying to democratize access to digital skills. And lastly, but definitely not least, and something I'm very passionate about from that start above, is creation. We do live in an economy that is driven by consumption, and so our kids spend hours and hours, me included, on TikTok or Instagram, but not creating, just consuming. And so what we are also doing is starting to spend some time teaching them how to create, how to use the internet in a way that makes sense, and to allow them to generate economies of scale within their townships. One of these stories is a kid who, like me, started tutoring. Soweto alone, hired 7 or 8 different tutors, and in the space of 2 to 3 months was generating 200,000 Rand a month from Soweto alone, just teaching physics and math, which was shocking because you would think that there's no funding in those areas, but parents are starting to invest in their kids and understand the importance of education. But that in itself shows you that even just these kids that are just a few years younger than me are able to start creating economies within those same townships where kids are unemployed. Now, just to wrap up, of course, when we looked at the blueprint that we have, Madinah really, the concept of Madinah is beyond just a spiritual city, but rather a recipe for us to be able to truly build communities that make positive impact. And so I know Sheikh Suleiman talked earlier about having Masajid be also centers where kids could learn how to code or learn tech-based education. And I think for me, what I've done is just try to connect the different principles from the Madinah blueprint to a world that could work, from creating learning hubs in these centers to building ethical entrepreneurs to mentorship programs. I think for me, these are actually where the magic recipes lie, in that we all have diverse skill sets, but also we can actually contribute even if we may not believe we can. So I have a question, and I just want you guys to reflect maybe for 20 to 30 seconds. Of course, the Masajid already there for this question, but if our beloved Prophet ﷺ walked into our communities today, where do you think he would start? Of course, if we have these Masajid and we have these centers of knowledge, what do you think he would do next? And I think that's actually a critical question for you to ponder on, because it's something I was thinking about for a very long time, because it'll actually give you sort of a space where you think you could fill that opportunity. And so for me, it was a few things. It was schools, mentorship networks, economic opportunities, of course, a prolific businessman, Prophet ﷺ, so teaching our kids how to do business effectively, and also building communities that are full of dignity. And so these are just my reflections of what I think our beloved Prophet ﷺ would build. And so that brings me to my closing message, which is we can't really change the world, or we shouldn't really try to change the world all at once. It's a very, very, very big task, and I don't think any of us have the skill to do it, but what if we just started with one? Just one kid, or one skill, or one internship, or sponsoring one student through their studies, or learning one technical skill, learn something on GPT, or Gamma, which is what we use to make this presentation. I know Ashraful Ed also said they use it, really cool. But just start with one. And I think that's my takeaway message is when we're building communities of innovation and trying to empower them, it's just one thing to do every single day, and inshallah, we could make this world a better place. Shukran so much for your time.